You're aware that when Dr. Murray discovered Michael Jackson, he immediately performed CPR.
Objection per Conrad Murray's statement.
Is that the prefatory phrase?
I think that's all the information he has, Your Honor. I think.
Why don't you re-ask the question, please? Sustain.
Pursuant to his statement, he immediately performed CPR, didn't he?
Yes.
And you think that's wrong? He shouldn't have done that.
I think he should have called for help.
And then, prior to calling Michael Amir, were you aware of the fact that he went partially down the stairs and called for help?
I did read that in the statement, yes. But he did not ask the chef to call 911. Asking for help, let me reiterate because I mentioned the word myself, it should be call 911. Help could be anyone. It could be one of his kids. They can't do the appropriate things that are necessary that paramedics and the fire department can do. So it is critical to ask for them to call 911.
Were you aware that he asked the chef to get security?
That's what I read in the statement, yes.
And you quarrel with the fact that you think it's wrong to assign the 911 logistics to security and give back to your patient.
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustain.
Do you think it's wrong to call security with the intention that you're going to turn that task over to security and that you're going to get back to your patient?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustain.
If you are of the opinion that security can come immediately, do you think it's wrong to have a state of mind where you're going to ask them to call 911?
Objection. Speculation assumes facts not in evidence. Irrelevant.
Sustain.
Were you aware of the fact that the chef who was asked to call security did not call security?
Objection. Relevance to this witness.
I'm not exactly sure about those details about exactly what was done.
And are you aware that the call to Mr. Williams, who was in charge of all the security and all the employees at the house, was done a significant time after that he had already asked the chef to get security? Were you aware of that?
I understand there was a period of 6 to 7 minutes after that, perhaps, based on the testimony.
Were you aware of the fact that when security walked into his bedroom, where Michael Jackson was, that the very first thing he said was, "We need an ambulance"?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
I don't recall that precise statement.
Okay. Nothing further.
Mr.
Your Honor.
Flanagan, thank you. We redirect Mr. Walgreen?
Question, Your Honor. Dr. Kamangar, just so the record's clear, in all your previous references to the need for the doctor to call for help, you were specifically stating the doctor needs to call 911 because the doctor knows he does not have the resources to save this individual's life.
Right, or if there's somebody that is immediately available, asking that person to call 911.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Walgreen, thank you. We be crossed, Mr. Flanagan.
If something happened to you, if there was only Mr. Walgreen in the room and myself, I would ask Mr. Walgreen to call 911.
What if there was someone in the hallway? Would you ask them?
I would have a shout out and shout out help, help, and that's the first thing you do. And if I don't get an immediate response within seconds, no, then that means I'm alone and I'm responsible for calling 911.
So if Dr. Murray was to go partway down the stairs and shout out for help, that wouldn't be adequate to you.
No, I think you should have called 911 right away.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Walgreen?
No, thank you.
May Dr. Kamangar be excused. Mr. Walgreen.
Yes, please.
Mr. Flanagan?
Yes, Your Honor.
Dr. Kamangar, thank you for your testimony, sir. Please don't discuss your testimony or the facts of the case with any other witnesses until we finish the trial. You may step down and leave, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walgreen, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People would call Dr. Stephen Schafer to the stand.
Solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may be seated. Please state your name for the record. Spell your first and last names.
Stephen Lewis Schafer, Stephen, S-T-E-V-E-N, Schafer, S-H-A-F-E-R.
Dr. Schafer, good morning. Let me provide you with some instructions. First of all, we'll provide you with a cup for the water. We don't like to advertise. So you'll be able to pour the water into the cup. No, that's all right. You can just put it down to the side. This way, people's view is not this. Please sit back and relax.
You for a living?
I'm an anesthesiologist.
And what is an anesthesiologist?
An anesthesiologist is a physician, graduated from medical school, and then spent 3 years in training to learn the specialized skills of anesthesia. An anesthesiologist is responsible for, the classic view is that we anesthetize patients for surgery. But what we actually do is really perioperative medicine. We assess patients prior to surgery. During surgery, we don't not just keep them asleep, but we're actually responsible for keeping them alive. We're responsible for their vital signs, responsible for the circulation and everything. After surgery, we are often responsible for them when they go to the critical care unit. So critical care is one of the subdisciplines of anesthesia. And because we're very much involved in pain management as part of our practice, many anesthesiologists are focused on pain management as well.
We're going to try to speak just a little bit slower.
Sorry.
That's all right. All of us. Mr. Waller?
Thank you. And in regard to you being a medical doctor and specifically an anesthesiologist, can you tell us a little bit about your current academic titles and positions that you hold?
Yes. I'm a professor of anesthesiology at Columbia University. I'm an adjunct professor of anesthesia at Stanford University. And I am an adjunct professor of bioengineering and therapeutic sciences at the University of California, San Francisco, in the School of Pharmacy.
And as far as being a professor of anesthesiology at Columbia University, how long have you had that position?
I started in 2007.
And in regard to being a professor of anesthesia at Stanford University in California, how long have you had that position?
I joined the Stanford faculty in 1987 and remained on faculty as an assistant professor, then as an associate professor, and I became a tenured professor at Stanford. I believe the year was 2000.
And as far as being an adjunct professor of bioengineering and therapeutic sciences at University of California, San Francisco, what is the class that you teach there?
There is a class, a graduate level class in what's called pharmacometrics, which is the science that relates how you give a drug to the concentrations and then what happens in the patient. And I teach in that class, which is the nature of that appointment.
And the science, you indicated the science of when you give a drug, and what did you follow that up with?
I'll work on speaking slowly. Pharmacometrics is a branch of science that deals with mathematical models to relate the dose of drug to the concentration of drug in the body and then to relate the concentration of drug in the body to what the drug actually does. It's been a discipline that has grown for about the last 50 years and has grown somewhat explosively in the last 20 years with advent of modern digital computing power.
And this science, pharmacometrics, that helps determine dosages and what dose is effective and the et cetera?
Absolutely. Pharmacometrics is one of the core competencies of every pharmaceutical company because they're expected to put together mathematical models that explain how when you get a certain dose of a drug, how your body responds in a certain way. And companies have to understand this in order to develop drugs at the right dose and then bring them to the market at a dose that's effective without also being toxic. So it's a core competency of every pharmaceutical company. It is a core competency of the Food and Drug Administration. Core competency of every pharmaceutical company, and it's also a core competency of the Food and Drug Administration. And it's incorporated into every label for every drug that the Food and Drug Administration comes forward with.
And those labels then can help doctors serve as guidelines for doctors to now know what the appropriate dosage is and things of that nature.
That's absolutely the point. That's absolutely correct. The purpose of the label is to guide the physician on how to use the drug safely and minimize toxicity. And pharmacometrics is the science that provides the numbers, the quantitative numbers that are used.
And in the end, when you say to minimize toxicity, what you're really saying is to minimize injury to the patient.
Absolutely.
Now, the Columbia University, Stanford University, and the University of California, San Francisco, is it fair to say those are among the top 3 medical schools in the country?
They're up there on most such lists, yes.
Okay, and you hold professorships at each of those 3?
Correct.
Now, you also are an editor-in-chief of a prominent anesthesia journal, is that correct?
Correct.
And what journal is that?
The journal is called Anesthesia and Analgesia, and it's the largest medical journal in the field of anesthesiology and perioperative medicine.
And as editor-in-chief, then, what do you do? What are your responsibilities as far as operating this anesthesia journal?
Well, I see every manuscript that is sent to the journal, and we get over 2,000 submissions every year. So I see 2,000 manuscripts come through. I personally screen the manuscripts for both merit and for integrity. For example, has any sign of plagiarism or any concerns about fraud. I then either handle the manuscripts myself, and I handle approximately a quarter of all submissions to the journal personally, or I assign them to a member of the editorial board. And we have an editorial board of 70 senior scientists and clinicians who handle manuscripts for the journal. Then they make decisions, the papers come back to me, and I review the decisions, and then we send the decisions to authors. Just by way of example, while I was waiting outside today, I handled 27 manuscripts. It's a treadmill that just goes on and on.
And when you say, excuse me, when you say manuscripts, what are we talking about? What is a manuscript?
Most manuscripts are research studies where someone has performed some sort of research relevant to anesthesiology or perioperative medicine, and they would like to see that paper, which used usually data, patient subjects, or maybe cell cultures, very basic science, but they would like to see that paper appear in anesthesia and analgesia. We also have things like case reports, just odd things that happen that people think might be interesting.
Now, as editor-in-chief of this journal, you have an editorial board, you said, of about 70?
Correct.
Okay. And does Dr. Paul White, one of the defense experts in this case, serve on that editorial board?
Absolutely.